Hi, I'm Michele Paradise, and in this video today, I'd like to talk about the difference between HSP introverts and HSP extroverts. Now, as you know, HSP stands for highly sensitive person, and there is a distinction. And just to remind you that 80% of the population are non-HSPs and 20% are. We're not better or worse. I'm an HSP. We're just different. And the difference really makes the world work. And this will make more sense as I talk. Within the 20% of the population being an HSP, there also 30% of HSPs are extrovert, which I think comes as a surprise to some people. It certainly did to me when I found out that I was an extrovert HSP, because I think people tend to think of highly sensitive people as quite shy and quiet. And in this case, introvert doesn't necessarily mean that. An extrovert doesn't necessarily mean what it means in other arenas. So I will clarify. An introvert HSP deeply processes, goes inside more. It's not that they're shy, they're just thinking. They're thinking a lot and processing a lot, deeply processing. The DOES acronym still applies here. And that is the level playing field for the introvert HSP and the extrovert HSP. So the D stands for deep processing. They both still do that. Overstimulation. Yes, they both get overstimulated. The E is deep empathy and emotions. Very emotional. Both of them do that as well. And the final one is sensitivity to subtle stimuli, which can look like an HSP might smell something in a room before a non-HSP does, or hear something in their environment before a non-HSP does. So I'm going to break this down into 10 categories. I'll go quickly through them, and I'm sure you'll find it really fascinating. The social energy aspect of HSPs. So the introvert HSP will really crave solitary activities, and they need significant downtime. Whereas an extrovert, they like to be around others. They like smaller periods of solitude. And again, this is me, so I know this on a personal experience. I do like to mix it up. I like to be around others, and I need less downtime, but I still need downtime. Social preferences. Introverts, they really need to get into deep and meaningful conversations, one-to-ones, small gatherings. So if they do socialize, it might be a group of friends over a meal, or just hanging out in somebody's home. It's much more controlled, the amount of people, the amount of stimuli, so that they can really focus on the other person or the few people in the room, and they can get into very deep and meaningful conversations with them. Extroverts, they do thrive on larger social gatherings, love meeting new people, and they, even though they're with larger groups of people, they still have the nuance, the ability to nuance the emotions that are going on in the gathering. So they might deeply connect with one person. They might see a person in a room or in the group of people they're talking to and really start connecting to them because they're picking up their energy. And they might recognize another HSP, which is quite common. Processing of experience is another one. So introverts require solitude to process. They really go inside. And this is where it can look like they are perhaps very shy, but they're not. They just require this time to deeply process what they may have experienced. Let's say they went to a party, a small gathering, or they watched a TV show or a film that deeply moved them, or music or a play. They prefer the solitude of processing. Whereas an extrovert likes the interaction with others to talk it through. So when I see a film or a play or whatever that deeply moves me, I want to talk to somebody else who's seen it. If the people that were with me don't really want to talk about it in the way I want to, frequently they do. I hang around HSPs. We will find people that have seen the same film. I will reach out to my children and say, did you see Oppenheimer? And then we can have, because both of my children are HSPs, so we have that deep conversation about it, and a lot of processing goes on. But I really value the opinion of others, especially other HSPs. New situations. Introverts are quite cautious, and they observe, and they might only connect to one or two people in a new situation, or maybe none, because they're not ready. Whereas an extrovert jumps into new experiences much more easily. We really like new experiences. We crave new experiences. We crave meeting new people. But within that, there is still, it's curated how we interact. So to give you an example, I recently went to a huge gathering. Well, it was rather large in a noisy room, and there were about 40 people in my group that I was meeting for the first time, some of them for the first time. So I positioned myself in one place in the room, and I stayed there. And my philosophy, my strategy is, right or wrong, I don't know, but I'm going to meet exactly who I'm meant to meet in that gathering. And that's pretty much what happened. I met about 5 or 6 people. They were all fascinating, and exchanged numbers, and we will probably meet again. But that's the way I do it. I don't really go around the room and say, hi, how are you? And what's your name? And what do you do? And things like that. I tend to wait until that person comes to me. Downtime, very significant. For introvert HSPs, it is non-negotiable. Absolutely non-negotiable. They need absolute solitude for however long they need it. Whereas downtime for me and other extroverts looks like with a very close circle of friends, maybe 1 or 2 friends, because again, we like to process externally more than we like to process internally. So I hope you're noticing some of these for yourself. Are you realizing that as an HSP, you might be more introverted or more extroverted? Yeah, listen to some of these and go inside and see how you're feeling about what I'm saying. Because it really does help us to navigate our world much more easily when we know who we are and understand our needs better. So sensitivity to others emotionally is a big one. Introverts get deeply empathic and emotional, and they frequently get drained, and that's why they really need solitude, non-negotiable downtime. Whereas an extroverted one, they're highly empathic and emotional, but they like to interact to help manage and understand others' emotions. So they might actually discuss, let's set up a scenario. Let's say you've met 3 people, and you have a friend that knows one of those 3 people, and you might say to your friend, tell me about that person, because this is what I picked up from them. I picked up this, this, and this. And your friend may say, well, yeah, you're somewhat right, but they've been going through a really hard time. They're going through a divorce, a breakup, whatever. And it really helps an extrovert HSP to be able to have that conversation with somebody else and to deeply understand what might be going on with that other person. Adapting to change is a big one. Introverts do not like sudden change. It's very, very disruptive to them. In fact, it can really shut them down, and they may need a lot of time to process and to really be able to find the resilience to come back. Now, I can say this from a personal perspective. I do not like very disruptive change, very sudden change. However, extrovert HSPs are much more adaptable. After the initial stress, they begin to process, and they might go outside of self to process. They might call somebody, they might engage in a conversation around it or read about it, interact with it in some way that they get a deeper understanding of it, and their resiliency comes back. It's much quicker for them to recover. Creative activities is a big one. Introverts really like solitary creative pursuits, really one-to-one things, not big team pursuits or large groups of people. So an example might be they want to learn how to paint or draw. They might not put themselves in a class. They might get one-to-one tutoring from a teacher. And that for them works much better because they need time to process what they're learning and to really connect with the medium that they're using, whatever it is. Whereas extroverts are much more collaborative with creative activities. They will, I remember when I was growing up, I joined all kinds of like glee clubs and theater societies and plays and musicals and all that because I loved working with a team to build something. Now, none of these mean I'm better or worse, by the way, just wanting to remind you of that. It's just that we process things differently. And when I first learned about highly sensitive people, I really didn't think I was one because I was so extroverted, and I really fell under that misconception that you had to be introverted to be an HSP. And I'm delighted to say that that's not true, and it's given me so much understanding of self. Networking. Again, the introvert is cautious and builds a few deep connections, if any, in the first instance. But, let's say an introverted person went to the event I went to the other night. They might deal with it very, very differently. They might not stay very long. They might stay for a shorter period of time, meet fewer people, not make a lot of eye contact. It's just a very different way of socializing. Whereas the extroverts have extensive networks. Now, that doesn't mean that all of these people become their friend, because for any HSP, these kind of friendships are very, very much of a big commitment. They take them quite seriously. We don't like to lose friends. No one does. But we can take things very personally. So, we don't have lots of friends, but the friends that we do have, there is a very deep connection and commitment. So even though the network might be extensive, and it might be expensive as well, it doesn't mean that we have hundreds and hundreds of friends. We might have a lot of acquaintances, but just a handful of people that we regularly interact with. So I think you can see that there's a lot of familiarity and a lot of similarity to both the introverted HSP and the extroverted HSP. It's just that one goes a little bit further outside of self. That's how I look at it. We go more outside of self, the extroverts. We gather information and emotions and nuance of sensitivity to the situation externally, whereas the introvert goes internally. So I hope this has helped you to realize the difference. It's quite subtle. And I hope it's helped you to connect back to yourself, especially the introvert ones, I know you will, and to see where you fall into the spectrum, because it is a spectrum and it's not black and white. It's not I'm an introvert or I'm an extrovert, because as always, you will respond differently to different situations. Some situations all HSPs feel more comfortable in because they're familiar. And even the introvert might feel more comfortable in certain situations. But then there will be situations where, for example, I don't think many introvert HSPs enjoy public speaking, which I do. Call me crazy, but I do. I like standing in front of a group of people. For most introvert HSPs, I think that would be an absolute nightmare for them. So that's a really good example of sort of how it separates us out. So as always, thank you very much for listening. Thank you very much for following me. Please subscribe. Press the subscribe button. I have many more videos coming. Keep well, stay safe, and see you soon.